Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. My name's William, this is iRacing, and today we're going to be driving the Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 around Silverstone Grand Prix. This is for the Michelin Pilot Challenge series in iRacing, the official series. The GT4 class has both the Cayman and the BMW M4, but we will be doing the Cayman specifically, as I do not believe the M4 is a competitive option for the series at the moment, unfortunately. Just in one lap pace, they are very close, but the BMW has some flaws. The Cayman also has, but they're just not as bad. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, we'll have a hot lap, a bit of a track guide, and then my setup as well in the video. So hopefully this can help you guys out if you're going to be racing this officially. It's a very fun series. The cars all have the new damage model. Makes it quite entertaining and a pretty good time. This will be a 45-minute race this week, which is out of the normal for the Michelin Pilot Challenge series. Normally they're 30-minute races, so that should spice things up a little bit and make it a pretty good time. Very fun battling in this car. Very good racing in my opinion. So um, hopefully some of the flaws with the cars can get worked out, but we'll talk about that later. Anyways, we'll go ahead and get on into the hot lap, and then I'll be back to talk to you guys through the track guide and the setup. Enjoy. Alright everybody, that was a hot lap around Silverstone in the Porsche Cayman GT4. Managed a 212.912. You can see my sector times over on the bottom right of the screen there. A little bit off of my optimum, and I expect to get better and faster as the week goes on, just throwing this together. To kind of try and give you guys a head start if you're working on this, practicing, as you have all week basically to do these races. We'll go ahead and get into a bit of a track guide. I'm not sure of a better way to do this, so stick with me on this format. It might change a little bit, and if you have anything that you'd like to see or something different or whatever with track guides in the future, if that's going to be a thing, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Just giving this a try for the first time right here, basically. So we're going to go ahead and get into the lap. As we start crossing the start-finish line there. So we're going to be going down in towards turn 1, And I'm just going to go ahead and pause it once we get a little bit closer into turn one here. Looking right here, so this is the curb you're going to want to use. You're going to want to get over on this left-hand side curb to really maximize and open up the entry into turn one. And this 100 board is a great reference. We're going to brake a little bit before the 100 board, as you can see right there. Yep, braking and just trailing ever so lightly on the brake with a little bit of initial wheel input as we trail into turn one, and really cutting this here. So if you drive over the green part here, you're completely fine. It's if you're getting into the grass, you're going to get a 1x there and invalidate your lap if it's on quali, or just build up those incident points. But you can already see that we are picking up the throttle basically as we're on the apex, which is what you're looking to do through this corner. You need to carry as much speed through this corner, and I actually could have carried a little bit more. I broke a little too heavily for the corner, but really opening it up and sacrificing not running too far to the left through the middle of this corner. That way we can not scrub too much speed as we come around to turn two, and uh, don't go into the grass here at all. That's not, you don't want to get too aggressive over here to the left, and you don't want to be too aggressive with the wheel inputs either, as you'll really kill the tires if you're just trying to keep the car tight to the left. It's really kind of pointless anyways. um, you're like I said, you're just going to scrub speed, slide the tires, and increase the heat in the tires, which is going to ultimately make your experience over 45 minutes a pretty bad one. So as we come into this section here, we're going to be looking this 100 board. You can see we're not even on the left side of the track. We're kind of in the middle of it. That's fine. You don't need to be all the way over to the left to open this corner up, and you can kind of brake towards the left side of the track anyways. So we're already on the brakes. Around the 100-meter board was our marker, and we're going to open it up as we're on the brakes and start turning in around this white line that just crossed the track, and aim for this red curb, not wanting to hit the red curb, but getting as close to it as possible and already on the throttle at that apex, and picking up the throttle quite aggressively in the car. The GT4 cars really respond well to very, very aggressive throttle inputs. So just absolutely smashing the throttle, which is something I'm very good at. Um, it doesn't, you don't really want a lot of throttle control necessarily. In some situations you need it, but a lot of the speed in this car is just from absolutely smashing the throttle whenever you need to get on it. So as we go into the next one, once again, you can see we're not even opening this up. It's just going to waste time basically, and scrub the tires getting all the way back over to the right. Um, and our braking marker for this one is about the start of this rumble strip over here on the left. Alternatively, you can use this little green, um, or on the right, I'm sorry, the rumble strip on the right, or this green AstroTurf that you can kind of see that starts on the left there, or the end of the rumble strip. It's a really good braking spot for that corner. It's a difficult one to actually get the braking right into, but as we come into it, we're going to get on the brakes around there, and once again, just kind of trailing the brake in, and the second we're coming off of it, right back into the throttle pretty aggressively, almost straight to 75%, and trying not to run wide of this uh, curbing here and getting into the dirt. It'll just kind of suck your car over to the right and drag you off there, and you basically just have to get off the throttle and completely ruin this next straightaway. So as we get going here, we're just going to cut this as much as possible. Once again, going for the curb and just full throttle through here. You need to be a little careful on your opening lap with the rear tires kind of trying to break loose through this section, but after that, it's pretty easy, wide open through here, and cutting it as much as possible, just trying to keep the momentum and take the shortest line as you can. So now we can just kind of fast forward down the straightaway here and get into the next braking zone. As we go under the bridge, we're going to start seeing these braking markers coming up. So we got the 150 and the 100. The 100 is basically going to be our braking marker. You can use the start of this first big black mark um, on the rumble strip as well if you need to, because we are braking a little bit before the 100, and it is right around that first black mark on the rumble strip. So we're going into here, we're going to be braking really hard and in a straight line until about the 50, and that's where we start turning in to the corner. Now this is kind of a tricky one as you turn in and then slowly just start trail braking more and more as you get down into it. And now we're kind of on the throttle, off the throttle, on the brake, and then the second we clip all of this green and orange back on the throttle as hard as possible, trying to get the run into the next corner. So we're already back on the throttle, like I said, and going into this next corner full throttle and all the way over on the right. Um, Basically, you're wanting to brake into this corner and get the car turning to the right as soon as possible and hug this curb. You kind of run a little wide from it, and then the car will come back in. As you feel the car start to come back in towards the curb is whenever you really commit to the throttle. So we're kind of half throttle through here, just keeping our momentum up, and the car has set over to the right, and I'm full throttle. It does get a little loose through this corner, so you need a little bit of throttle control through that corner. And feel free to open up the wheel and use all of this nice green beyond the rumble strip as you exit there. So now then down the straightaway, this is just something I don't see people do for some reason, and it actually is worth a bit of time. Just cut this rumble strip. Just make sure you're not hitting the wall, and keep a nice tight line through there. It does make a difference. It's those little bits of time that you find around the lap. But anyways, as we get into the next corner here, we're looking for the 100 board on the left. That's really the only reference you're going to have for this, so make sure you're comfortable with that. We get into the 100 board and we're braking before it once again. So these braking markers are just earlier in general than like GT3 cars, if that's something you're familiar with. They're about 30-50 meters earlier than some GT3 cars. Not 50 quite, but 30, maybe some cases 40, just depending on the corner, because you're really wanting to carry speed. And I know in a GT3 car I could brake about here initially, but in these GT4s I'm braking just before the 100 board. So braking, and I'm overlapping my inputs here because I'm a bit of a pleb, but braking about 50% brake and just trailing it off as I turn into the corner at the 50 board. So we're trailing it off through the corner, and then as we get the car, as I know it's going to hit this apex that I want, which is right around this last orange box. It's really nice, really bright, easy to see. This last orange box is what I'm aiming for, and you can actually cut this a little bit more, but the Cayman likes to bounce a lot. I wasn't too happy with how unpredictable it was cutting it more. But that last orange box, we're going full throttle once again. Like I said, aggressive on the throttle and on the exit. You need to watch to make sure you're not using too much of the runoff over here, as you'll get a 1x. And if you go even beyond this green that's kind of painted on the track, you'll actually get a slowdown as well. So just keeping basically, I like to try and keep my right hand tires no further over than this rumble strip for sure, especially with this kind of like white green uh, little bit of curbing that's going on there. Um, Making sure the car doesn't go any further left than that white and green painted curbs that you've got there. So now we're going to run into the S's. So just talking about this part, I always try and set it up as far to the right as possible. One, I think this is the best defensive line you can have going into here. Um, in my opinion, I want to be further to the right. I can miss the first S and take it a little wide as long as I have the second S. That's where I want to be. It might be different for you, but that's my opinion on taking these corners. So we're going to stay all the way to the right and then turn in. Nice, easy, gentle turn in, and aiming for this curb for the first S. We're actually going to hit it, which is what I want to do. The second I hit it, I'm on the brakes for the first S and downshifting. And now I am aiming for these orange boxes that you see right in front of the car. So I am going to try and put my right wheels over the edge of these orange boxes as I go through here. And if you did it right, um, you're cutting this as much as possible, and you're taking a nice, easy approach so that you can set up every single next S through here. So we're back on the throttle once again, not running all the way over to the left, so we still have a good chance of making a nice, decent entrance. Once again, on the brakes, this part is a lot of rhythm and a little bit difficult to get, but again, aiming for these orange boxes. I don't want to be any further over than this through this S, really, as I just kind of want to trace the car along this curb as I go through the S, and then leave the curb, set the brakes again to set the nose of the car, and get all the way over onto the right on this curb, and then once it's painted, getting the car over onto these orange boxes, as you'll see here, just clipping those orange boxes and back into the throttle as hard as possible, and not exceeding this green painted area at all on the exit here. If you're exceeding kind of what I did through this part, you can get a really big slowdown through the S's of this track. So just making sure you're staying in the confines of these green painted areas around the track and not getting in the dirt. You'll get a slowdown and have a very bad time. But we're full throttle out of here and carrying good speed down the straightaway. Could have been a little bit more aggressive through those S's, but that is pretty much the line that I try and stick to. So we're going to go down the straight now, and it's really not too complicated, but this is the corner that I actually feel like I really messed up on this lap. So the 100 board, once again, is where I would normally brake in a um, like higher downforce car like a GTE or a GT3, maybe even a little bit past it. But in this car, you can see we're braking just about the 125, so right in between the 150 and the 100. There's not really a good marker for this at all, but you just kind of have to judge it as you're halfway between, and maybe even this sand that you can see, or the end of this red, or the start of the red on the wall. Um, but I felt like I didn't brake early enough. I kind of missed the apex on the corner here. So you can see I didn't quite hook the curb that I wanted to. I'm just a little bit off of it, and I never quite get the car over to it. So really, the apex I want is about between this first or the second orange box, as the first one's right there. So this second orange box, maybe even just in between the second orange box and the third orange box, is the apex I'm looking for. I don't quite get it, and I'm running wide, but I am hard back in the throttle and gonna go ahead and get a decent exit. And once again, um, you need to at least keep two of your tires basically on the right side of this white line, as I think the off-track detection is from the center of the car, and if I was any further to the left, really, I'd get an off-track there and invalidate my lap. Once again, if you go even further out, I believe you get a slowdown there as well. But anyways, that's that corner. I'm going to run down into the last section now. The 100-meter board is once again going to be our friend, but we're going to brake a little bit before it and just about there. So about 10 meters before the 100 board, hard onto the brakes, onto this rumble strip on the right, to try and give us as wide of an entry into this section as I can get. Really turning the car in right around the 50-meter board and just aiming for this red. Trying not to hit it. I don't think I do. Perfect. Not hitting it, and then once I can see this red curb, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to aim about a car off of this red curb. That way I can turn into it early and kind of cheat this a little bit and get. Um, you don't want to aim right for the red curb, but you want to aim like a little bit beyond it, and that way you can get back on the throttle basically as you're next to the red curb. Through here also, you're going to be fighting the rear tires a little bit, and I think I get a little loose here, but hard back into the gas and just making sure not to run over any of these red curbs that you see, as they will really slow you down, and not going outside the bounds of these curbs either, as it is an off track or a slowdown, and either one of them are bad. So having to lift a little bit just to keep the rears in check and counter steering. But overall, a decent last sector, and that comes across the line for a 212.912. Yeah, I hope that helps you guys. I hope that's clear. Like I said, um, anything you'd like to see or anything different about the track guides, feel free to leave it in the comments below. First time doing it this way, so I understand if there's some things you'd like to see different, or any kind of critiques or advice like that are welcome. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get into the setup now for this car. It is really quite simple. Um, for the GT4s, there's not a lot you can change, and we'll go ahead and start with the tire pressures. This is a new tire model thing with these cars. The lowest you can go is 20 psi, and what works in iRacing seems to just be the lowest tire pressure possible. So 20 psi is what you're going to want it set to. Um, Basically, there's no reason to balance them or anything like that. Just set it as low as possible, and that's what's going to work best for you. Onto the settings on the chassis page. Um, this is ultimately what I found to be the best. Let's see, we'll go ahead and change this over to metric as well, just to see this toe in on the front really helps with the turn in of the car. It feels quite understeery through the middle of the car, so a little bit of extra toe on the front helps with that. All the camber that you can really get on the front, as the camber doesn't really seem to affect tire temperatures for some reason. They're going to overheat no matter what you do, so you might as well have that extra little bit of camber and get the speed out of it. On the rear, once again, I do try and run it just a little bit lower because it feels like the car stays a little bit more stable longer. But really, I notice more out of running less toe on the rear of the car for keeping the tires kind of alive, as well as a softer anti-roll bar on the rear. So for a qualifying setup, really the only change I would make would be go ahead and just increase this camber on the rear to its max setting, which I think is only 4.5, and then increase the rear anti-roll bar stiffness a little bit to give the car a little bit more bite. You can also increase the rear ride height for a quali setup to around 100, and basically even with the front, or maybe even higher to like 103 millimeters. It gives it just a little bit more um, grip initially on the front of the car, and it does fall off, in my opinion, though, with it higher up. Probably because the tire pressures build so much, and it gets a lot higher um, than what you're going to be at out of the pits. Also, the ABS, TC, and ESC setting, I run this on 6. For qualifying, I typically run a little lower, like 5 or 4. But for a race, I start on 6, and then I start increasing it a little bit to about the max I'll ever go is 8. But really, in a race situation, these tires overheat. Um, it's the way the tire model is at the moment, and you're trying to avoid sliding the car at all, if like in any way, shape, or form, because it just makes it worse. The Cayman is really bad on its rear tires specifically, whereas the BMW M4 is bad on both its fronts and its rears, which is why I think it is not competitive in a race situation, especially since this one is going to be a 45-minute race. So um, ultimately that's why we have this setup here. Also, just a couple little things on the setup for adjustments if you need to make them to make it a little bit more user friendly for you to drive. If you're really struggling with it getting a little out of hand on corner exit, you can increase the bump stiffness on the rear if it's a little too much oversteer. You can also go ahead and increase the rebound stiffness on the front of the car to try and kind of mitigate that a little bit. Also, I have this little bit of bump stiffness in the front to try and keep the nose a little bit more in check on initial turn in. This is mostly for the early stages of the race, but also you can increase the front anti-roll bar stiffness on the front as well if you want to get a little bit more kind of understeer into the front of the car. If it's oversteering a little bit too much for you on turn in, you can increase that. It'll probably be most noticeable in the high-speed corners where you might be getting something like that. Also to basically handle the oversteer on turn in. If that's something you're getting, you can increase the rebound stiffness on the rear of the car as well. And like I said, this is a 45-minute race, so I went ahead and put 60 liters in the car, or 15.9 gallons. I was getting just about 3/4 of a gallon, so like 0.75 gallons a lap is the kind of fuel burn I was seeing. And so this 15.9, this is good for, I believe, 22 laps. My math was showing if I ran like really fast and consistent pace, I would be looking at doing 21 laps. And you got to think that it's a rolling start, so you're going to have to do your grid to the start finish line as well. So this was a safe amount of fuel. You don't want to get caught out thinking it's a 30-minute race here, because it is 45 minutes this week. So I think a proper amount of fuel, and this car isn't too terribly affected by just a couple extra clicks of fuel as well. So if you're a little unsure of your fuel burn or something like that, um, you can go ahead and add just a little bit of that if you feel like you need to. But anyways, guys, that is the setup for this car. I haven't really done a whole lot of setups for iRacing or track guides or anything like that. So if you like this, give it a thumbs up. Lets me know you want to see more of this kind of stuff. Any kind of feedback or anything on the setup, leave it in the comments below. I try and read them all. Um, like I said, I'm gonna try and do a couple of these races this week. I might even try and record one and put it up or something. But I hope this helps you all, and good luck to anyone racing this week. It should be a lot of fun. I love this track. I'm really enjoying this series, and hopefully I can maybe see a couple of you out there. But um, anyways, I hope to see you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.